Have you ever noticed how some people seem unshakable? While others are losing their minds in traffic, these rare individuals remain calm. When criticism comes, they listen with curiosity instead of defensiveness. When plans fall apart, they adapt with ease instead of frustration. What if I told you this wasn't some genetic gift they were born with? What if this superpower, the ability to never get angry or bothered by anyone, is something you could develop starting today? This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending problems don't exist. It's about developing such profound inner strength that external circumstances lose their power over you. It's about becoming the eye of the hurricane, perfectly calm while chaos swirls around you. Today, I'm going to share with you the exact framework that has transformed thousands of lives. These principles have helped executives lead more effectively, parents raise children with greater patience, and ordinary people experience extraordinary peace regardless of their circumstances. Are you ready to claim your emotional freedom? Let's begin. When someone cuts you off in traffic, speaks rudely to you, or criticizes your work, what's your first thought? If you're like most people, it's something like, "They made me angry," or "They ruined my day." This perspective seems reasonable, but it contains a dangerous assumption that others control your emotions. Emotional ownership means recognizing a profound truth. No one can make you feel anything without your permission. Your emotions are not created by external events but by your interpretation of those events. This isn't just positive thinking. It's the foundation of personal power. Think about it. Two people can experience the identical situation and have completely different emotional responses. One person gets a critical email from their boss and spirals into anger and defensiveness. Another receives the same email and thinks, "This feedback could help me improve." Same stimulus, different response. What's the difference? Not the external event, but the internal processing. When you truly embrace emotional ownership, you stop saying, "You made me angry," and start saying, "I chose anger in response to what you did." This subtle shift changes everything. It moves you from victim to creator, from passenger to driver of your emotional experience. This doesn't mean ignoring genuine injustice or putting up with mistreatment. Quite the opposite. When you own your emotions, you can address problems from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. You can set boundaries without the burning resentment. You can speak truth to power without letting fear or anger diminish your effectiveness. Emotional ownership requires brutal honesty with yourself. Next time you feel bothered by someone, pause and ask, "What story am I telling myself about this situation? What meaning am I assigning to their actions? What alternative interpretations might exist?" These questions aren't about excusing bad behavior. They're about reclaiming your power from those who would unintentionally or deliberately provoke you. The most liberating realization you can have is that your emotional state is your responsibility and yours alone. When you fully embrace this principle, you'll find yourself responding thoughtfully where once you would have reacted impulsively. You'll see that what once looked like triggers were actually invitations to grow. Imagine you're driving to an important meeting when suddenly you get a flat tire. Most people would immediately feel frustrated, anxious, or angry. But what if instead you thought, "This delay might be saving me from an accident up ahead," or "Now I have 10 unexpected minutes to prepare mentally for my meeting"? Same situation, completely different emotional experience. All because of perspective. Perspective is the lens through which you view life. It determines whether you see problems or opportunities, whether you feel victimized or challenged. The remarkable truth is that you have the power to choose your perspective in any situation. This choice is your greatest power. Consider the ancient Zen story of the farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors said, "Such bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing 3 wild horses with it. "Such good luck," exclaimed the neighbors. "Maybe," responded the farmer. The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses, fell off, and broke his leg. "Such bad luck," the neighbors cried. "Maybe," said the farmer. The next day, military officials came to the village to draft young men into the army, but the farmer's son was spared because of his broken leg. "Such good luck," said the neighbors. "Maybe," replied the farmer. The farmer understood what most of us forget. We cannot possibly know the ultimate meaning of events as they unfold. What seems disastrous today might be revealed as a blessing tomorrow. What appears to be someone intentionally bothering you might be the universe redirecting you toward growth. When someone criticizes your work, you can see it as an attack on your competence or as valuable feedback that others might be afraid to give you. When someone treats you rudely, you can see it as a personal slight or recognize it as a reflection of their inner turmoil that has nothing to do with you. When plans fall through, you can see failure or redirection. Cultivating powerful perspective requires training yourself to ask better questions. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What might this be preparing me for?" Instead of, "How dare they treat me this way?" ask, "What must they be experiencing to behave like this?" Instead of, "Why does this always happen?" ask, "What pattern might I need to recognize here?" Remember, the meaning of any event is never inherent in the event itself. The meaning comes from the perspective you choose to adopt. Choose wisely, for your perspective will create your emotional reality. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose. In that choice lies our growth and happiness. Most people never discover this space. They move directly from stimulus to reaction, living at the mercy of whatever or whoever triggers them. A reaction is automatic, unconscious, and often regrettable. A response is intentional, conscious, and aligned with your highest values. The difference between them is the pause, that crucial moment when you recognize that you have a choice. Think about your most recent emotional outburst. Perhaps someone cut you off in traffic, or a colleague took credit for your work, or your spouse said something that felt disrespectful. Did you react immediately, or did you create space before choosing your response? Most of us react, and reactions almost always make situations worse. The good news is that the space between stimulus and response can be expanded through practice. It begins with awareness, simply noticing when you're being triggered. Physical sensations often provide the first clue: a tightening in your chest, a flush of heat, a knot in your stomach. These sensations appear before the full emotional reaction takes hold. When you notice these early warning signs, take a physical breath. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the fight-or-flight response that fuels reactive behavior. One conscious breath can be the difference between a reaction you'll regret and a response you'll be proud of. With that breath, ask yourself, what outcome do I want from this situation? This question shifts your focus from the momentary satisfaction of emotional release to the longer-term goal of effective resolution. It moves you from emotion-driven to purpose-driven. Next, consider your options. You always have at least 3. You can change the situation, change your thinking about the situation, or remove yourself from the situation. Reactions typically attempt only the first option, changing the other person through force or persuasion. Responses consider all 3 possibilities and select the one most likely to serve your true interests. Finally, choose your action based on wisdom rather than emotion. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means integrating them with your higher reasoning and values. Ask, will this action bring me closer to the person I want to be? Will it serve my long-term interests? Will I be proud of this tomorrow? The space between stimulus and response is where personal freedom lives. When you learn to inhabit this space consistently, you'll find yourself responding thoughtfully to provocations that once would have triggered automatic reactions. You'll experience the profound relief of knowing that while you can't control what happens to you, you absolutely can control how you respond. Many people believe that not getting bothered means becoming a doormat, allowing others to treat you however they wish without consequence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The ability to remain emotionally unshaken actually depends on having clear, well-enforced boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define where you end and others begin. They clarify what behaviors you will and won't tolerate, what responsibilities belong to you and what belong to others. Without clear boundaries, you'll find yourself constantly emotionally entangled in other people's behavior, perpetually bothered and frustrated. The paradox of boundary setting is that it simultaneously demonstrates respect for yourself and for others. By clearly defining your limits, you honor your own needs while giving others the information they need to interact with you successfully. Far from being selfish, proper boundary setting creates the foundation for healthier relationships. But here's the crucial distinction: effective boundaries are established without emotional attachment. Most people only set boundaries when they're already angry, using phrases like, "I've had it up to here," or "Don't you ever do that again." These emotion-laden statements might feel satisfying in the moment, but they rarely create lasting change. Instead, set boundaries preemptively and dispassionately. State your limits clearly. "I'm available for work calls between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays," or "I'm happy to discuss this when both of us can speak respectfully." Notice that these statements don't attack or blame, they simply establish parameters for engagement. The most challenging aspect of boundary setting isn't articulating the boundary, it's maintaining it through consistent consequences. If you tell someone you won't engage when they raise their voice, but then continue the conversation when they do, you've taught them that your boundaries are negotiable. If you say you need uninterrupted time to work but constantly respond to non-emergency interruptions, you signal that your stated limits aren't real. Remember, you teach people how to treat you. Each time you allow a boundary violation without consequence, you're providing training that your words don't match your actions. Each time you enforce a boundary consistently, you're teaching others and yourself that your needs matter. The beauty of well-established boundaries is that they eventually require minimal enforcement. When people know where your lines are, and know that crossing them has consistent consequences, they'll adjust their behavior accordingly. This creates an environment where you're rarely bothered because violations become rare. Perhaps most importantly, proper boundaries allow you to separate others' behavior from your emotional state. When someone crosses a line, you don't need to get angry. You simply implement the predetermined consequence. There's freedom in this clarity, a release from the exhausting cycle of emotional reactivity. The principles we've discussed, emotional ownership, perspective shifting, response over reaction, and boundary setting, aren't just concepts to understand intellectually. They're skills to be developed through deliberate, consistent practice. Just as no one becomes physically fit by reading about exercise, no one achieves emotional mastery without daily implementation. Every interaction is an opportunity for practice. That driver who cuts you off in traffic? That's not an annoyance, it's a training opportunity. The colleague who sends a terse email? Not a frustration, a chance to exercise your perspective-taking muscles. The family member who pushes your buttons? They're providing valuable resistance training for your emotional fitness. Begin by selecting one small area for practice. Perhaps you commit to pausing before responding to any digital communication that triggers you. Or maybe you practice perspective shifting during your daily commute, intentionally reframing annoyances as opportunities. Start small, but start immediately and consistently. Track your progress. At the end of each day, reflect on situations that once would have bothered you but that you handled with greater emotional mastery. Notice not just the external results but the internal shift, the growing sense of space between trigger and response, the increasing ease with which you can shift perspective, the decreasing power that others' actions have over your emotional state. Expect setbacks and use them as data, not discouragement. When you do get angry or bothered, and you will, because you're human, don't compound the problem with self-criticism. Instead, approach the situation with curiosity. What specific trigger bypassed my awareness? What story was I telling myself in that moment? What practice might help me handle similar situations better in the future? Develop environmental supports for your practice. This might mean placing reminder notes in strategic locations, creating a daily meditation practice that strengthens your capacity for non-reactivity, or enlisting an accountability partner who shares your commitment to emotional mastery. Remember that emotional mastery, like any significant skill, develops through stages. You'll move from unconscious incompetence, being unaware of how reactive you are, to conscious incompetence, noticing your reactivity but struggling to change it, to conscious competence, maintaining composure through deliberate effort, and finally to unconscious competence, responding skillfully without conscious effort.